It's gross. I don't like long beards. I like manicured beards.
Welcome to Dad Habits Die Hard. We don't have all this figured out, and we aren't experts. We're just two dads who love Jesus and our family and want to serve both well. We've done it wrong way more than we've done it right, but we're just trying to fail forward, realizing that we're leaving a legacy no matter what. I grew mine for 5 months, I think. So it was pretty long, man. Crazy
If
stuff.
you ever want to do it, get some beard oil and like have the.
Yeah, I could totally, kind of like do this motion with it, which was kind of gross.
Man.
All right. Well, we're recording, so just FYI, I don't say anything stupid. Well, at
I
least
do
on
that from
purpose.
time to time.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to get you a mic, I think, because I can hear the mix right now, and I sound really clear, and you don't. Do I sound really clear to you?
That's about normal and everything, Matt. So let's apologize. Let me apologize. You don't need to apologize because you're crystal clear HD.
Yeah,
I am behind the world standards right now in audio. So let the comments fly that my audio is trash. But then again, I don't know how many of you have listened to a podcast before and it's terrible audio, but like you still listen because it's still good content.
Yeah, for sure.
We might not have both of those, but just deal with it, people, is what I would tell you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send you one of these mics. They're like $50, and it's a game changer, obviously.
It looks cool in front of you like that.
Yeah, man. All right, so I guess welcome to this week's podcast. We are a couple days behind. We've been trying to, do them every week. Obviously, last week was Thanksgiving week, so that wasn't going to happen. And then this week, I had a family issue I needed to tend to. So obviously, since we're talking about dads primarily, it seemed ironic for me to, ignore my family in order to do a podcast. So we kind of moved it a couple of days here. So I think that's going to be okay. Before we left, we were talking about the upcoming Thanksgiving break. And, we had some goals. We were going to try to stay off the phone. We were going to try to engage our families. And so I'm curious how you did with that. And then I will break the bad news on how I did. So.
Oh, no. Okay. So one way to hold me accountable, and I guess I'm going to do the same for you, and to remember, I think that's fantastic. We had probably 19 people in our house, all about. And so I don't know that I didn't, no, you know what I did? I left my phone in the bathroom. And then of course I have my watch for whatever reason. If we live on land, so if I'm far away and a kid breaks their leg on a 4-wheeler or something, we can call the paramedics. But so, I mean, if I were to rate myself, I think I did pretty good. My screen time hits me and it's normally right at 2 hours. And I think it was at like an hour and I think right at an hour. So
nice. So you did about half
I think
of the activity you normally do.
I felt good. I didn't feel like I shouldn't be on my phone. What's interesting that when you do that, it's terrible. This might sound really judgmental. You notice how much other people's phone activity is happening, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like when you're making an effort not to drive and be on the phone, you notice how many people are.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
You notice a lot more things when you're not looking at your phone driving, like car stopping in front of you, so to speak. So do you feel like you're engaged your family well, took care of your wife? I know it was kind of a stressful time for her.
Yeah, I think just simply putting that away and not dealing with just feeling the vibration in your pocket, right? There's so much psychology of like, I just need to know what that was. And it's off on my watch, so I don't even get the vibrations on my watch. But I think that's incredibly helpful if, whether that's Thanksgiving or if you can figure out a rhythm that you can turn it off if that's every night, or I don't know, do you do that every night?
Yeah, I have it on do not disturb.
Yeah.
And so, and I put it next to my bed, so definitely not on it at night. Well, I mean, I guess I am to some extent, but I sleep well.
Okay, what's your disappointing news? Because I did get a phone call from you just shortly before I think it kicked off, or it was early that morning or something. I don't
Yeah.
even remember what day it was.
So unfortunately, I had to be on my phone a little bit. So on the way to Colorado, our uh, 2017 Ford Expedition EL got the extra long because we got too many dang kids. Um, it decided it did not want to run properly anymore. And, it already had like 125,000 miles. And we knew we weren't going to be able to keep it forever and that we were eventually going to have to upgrade. So it started having some problems, and it's kind of 50-50 on I knew what the problem was. But at the end of the day, we had already kind of been talking about getting a new vehicle, and I didn't want to risk being wrong in what I thought the repair was and then breaking down on the way home from Colorado.
Mm.
So yeah, we bought a car on vacation. So I've never done that before. Never purchased a vehicle in another state. I know you have,
Wow.
right? You
Hmm.
bought a car in Colorado Springs, same place I did. And so yeah, I had to be on my phone looking for a car, doing some research, finding the dealership, doing all of that. Um, Went purchased the vehicle. Crazy story. So last week, or maybe it was early this week, I went to my wife's school where she teaches, and a former teacher I used to work with, who's still there, came up to me and said, "Hey, by the way, did you buy a car in Colorado Springs on vacation?" And I said, "Yeah. How did you know that?" She goes, "I was at the dealership and I saw you." So this lady, who I know very well for many years, was at the same dealership in the same city in Colorado at the same time. And apparently I was going back with the finance person or whatever, so she couldn't grab me. But how crazy is that? And then, so we went from the extra big Ford Expedition to a 4Runner, which is much smaller. Our kids are getting older. I've got one that's driving, one that's close to driving. So we didn't feel like we needed the, extra huge car anymore. I knew you guys downgraded at some point too. But since we had all the luggage with us, I had to make a plan on what we were going to do for that. So I had to be looking on Facebook Marketplace to try to find some sort of rack or carrier or something to throw it on the top. Um, and where my sister-in-law lives is in between Buena Vista and Salida, beautiful areas, but it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Denver, Colorado Springs, all the major cities. And
Mm.
so there were tons of things on Facebook Marketplace that were good options that were 2 hours away. And so I was just kind of looking and looking and looking and looking, and finally found something in the town itself. And so it was a really good deal. So I was able to get all the stuff home, which was great. But it necessitated, unfortunately, me, spending some time on my phone, kind of shopping and things like that. But I will say, when it was like really family time, I left it in the other house we were staying in. And then when we went to actually have Thanksgiving at my brother-in-law's family house, um, didn't get on it there either. And so I did a fair job, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to just put it away completely. So is what it is.
I feel like that what you're describing though, it's not like it was all frowned upon by the entire family. It's not like your wife was like, "Oh, you're being selfish on Thanksgiving and going and buying a car." It's like, what do you do? You're, thousands
Right.
of miles from home or whatever, and it's like we got to do something. And
Yeah.
so,
Is
sometimes you
what
got to
it
take a hit for
is.
the team. Yeah. What do you
So
got?
I would say it was a success overall in a lot of ways, other than, being an expensive vacation. But she's got a really nice, sweet car. So I'm excited about that. So, good stuff. I am yawning a lot, man.
Yeah,
Need some
you
more
are.
sleep.
So hang on. Some people might be wondering, this could be a whole nother podcast as far as like cars and all the above. You went from a really big car.
Yep.
That was my first question to you. To a really, I'm like a 4Runner, Matt. Like I know they make a third row seat. How is that working on the short? Like, is it third row? Are you just cramp the kids that are sitting back there? Is it working okay?
So actually, we've rarely used the third row since we got it. Namely because my oldest kid drives, and
Okay.
so there's not a whole lot of places we go as a family all together anymore. Like church would be an example of what we normally would, but my
Mhm.
daughter works the second service, so she drives separately. And so, what we've been doing really, we got three kids left. Well, they can sit three across in the
Mhm.
middle row. So we've used it a couple of times, but really hasn't been that necessary. Ugh, to be
What
honest with
time did you
you.
wake up this morning?
4:30. Just time I normally
Yeah,
wake
that's
up, but
okay.
is what it is. I don't know. Sometimes I just yawn a lot. I think it's a side effect of some of the medicine I'm taking, honestly. So
Hmm.
fun times. So yeah, well, good. Well, we wanted to talk about something specific today, and it's I think correct me if I'm wrong. It's called the Five Shifts of Manhood. Is that what it's actually called, or is there a different name for it? Do you know?
Well, so this comes from a book. I might have shared it last time called The Intentional Father
Mm-hmm.
by John Tyson. And there's a chapter, it's actually chapter 8 that this shifts come from. So, um, I read this book a couple of years ago, probably a year, 2 years ago, and it just really started. I have two boys, and I think you can tweak this for girls as well. But because my two boys are the oldest, I'm thinking a lot about it with them because I just see so much of a lot of little boys running around and grown up people.
100%.
And I think it's really important. And there's also lots of other raising a modern day knight, I think is the other book, Matt, about how so many other cultures have like a very specific, hey, you're 13, you're now a man. And every other culture, 13, as far as what I know, they're deemed as a man. Here it's like 18. I always remember my parents being like, when you're 18, 18, it's like, what is in the world is going to happen when I turn 18? I feel like that's all I hear. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't seem as big as it was when I turned 18. But how do we prepare our boys that God's given us and equip them to be able to handle the world in which they're going to walk out to and rule and subdue and create? Like that's on us as fathers to figure out how we do that. And so we should be training. The Bible's clear about training up a child in the way that they should go. So when they're old, they won't depart from it. Training is different than teaching. And so I just kind of have started thinking through ramble thoughts on it. So let me just share the five thoughts, or the five shifts. And it actually, to do credit, it comes from a book called Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. So Richard Rohr is the one who wrote about the five rules of manhood. And so the five rules are: life is hard, you are not important, your life is not about you, you are not in control, and you are going to die. So those are really
Which seem really
encouraging.
harsh, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like they seem super negative. And but I think when you look at them through a different kind of lens a little bit, and maybe that's where you're going, they tend to make a little bit more sense, especially for the follower of Jesus, right?
And yes, they are harsh. The other day, my son was like, I had queued this up to share it with him. He's 10, and it was going crazy. I called him in my office. I was like, okay, let's just go over this. And like, I got to continue to remind this. I mean, even sometimes for me. And I shared a couple of them. I shared all five with them, and it was just kind of the beginning of it. But it is kind of harsh. But on the next page, it talks about how John Tyson, with his son, he said, instead of saying life is hard, he says it's a shift from ease to difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying you're not important, he said to his boys, care about them. Boys care about themselves, but men care about others.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying your life is not about you, I said you're part of the story, but you're not the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying you're not in control, I said it's a shift from control to surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying you're going to die, I said it's a shift from temporary to eternal. So again, none of this is like my thinking, but it has helped me like really process, okay, I've got to do something with this. And so really, Matt, what I'm thinking about right now is like with these shifts, there's a book called Power of Moments, and it's really a powerful book. But like we always remember the moments in our lives, like oh my gosh, I went on a cruise for my 21st birthday, or I got this car, or my parents gave me this really memorable thing. Like I right now want to get a shield. It's in my Amazon cart. It's this metal shield. It's not it's pretty expensive, like $170. Um, and I want to find a way to like ingrain these rules on there. And so I'm going to give that to him, maybe on his 11th or 12th birthday, and then maybe get like a sword. Like, think of some ways that I can give tangible things. And so as he grows up and gets older, like these are like, he can look at those things on the wall and remember, okay, this is how my dad trained me, so that then he can train, Lord willing, if he has sons or daughters. So
Right.
that's like top of mind what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I shared them with my teenage son the other day and just kind of asked him, like, do these make sense to you? Do you think that this is right? What are your thoughts? And, he actually agreed with them and thought that they were really good. And he hadn't really thought about it that way. And I'll be honest with you, I turned 40 here in a couple days. And I would say, in a lot of ways, there are some of these things that I haven't done until this last year. So this is not certainly like something that's only
Totally.
for kids. This is relevant to adults. So in
Hmm.
me, it's not just like becoming a man, but it's becoming like a man of God, right? It's becoming
Hmm.
a father, a husband, because we all want to do those things and we struggle with them. I was looking at 1 Corinthians 13:11, and Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and he said, "When I was a child, I talked like a child,
Hmm.
I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away the childhood behind me." And when you look at these five shifts and you look at the opposite, right? Kind of that immature, childish way of looking at things, you can see how even as a 40-year-old man, a 50-year-old man, a 30-year-old man, you can still, have the mindset of a child, by not following these. And so I think they're really crucial, for people of all ages, and even something that, Paul was talking about to the Corinthians. So love it.
I think I love that. I love the honesty. And we're all like wrestling through this. I know I'm wrestling through this at different times. I try and find like different things if we're working out in the yard or we're doing something hard and they're complaining or something. It's like, hey, you know what? Life, like we work through this because there's going to be a lot of other things that you're going to have to work through that are going to be hard. So if I just give you an easy pass
Mhm.
on picking up some leaves or mowing the lawn, like you were built to do hard things. And like we need to work through, how to like, so like those live demonstrations, which is what we see Jesus. And if we looked at Jesus, he's the epitome of manhood, right? Which, if we're being straight clear, which is another fun exercise to do, is just get on a whiteboard and say, hey, what does the world say a man is and what does the Bible say a man is?
Right.
They're totally different, you know? And like my kids and I see that everywhere. And so we just say, oh, well, I see that. I just, big truck, muscles, whatever we want to, label, like that's a man.
Yeah, we tell our kids a lot of times whenever they kind of are having that breakdown moment of like, this is too hard, I can't do this. We just kind of give them that self-talk of saying, I can do hard things. It just kind of, we repeat
Yes.
that, you can do
Yeah.
hard things. Say it. I can do hard things. I can do hard things,
Hmm.
right? Because kids, and maybe it's a generational thing, but I feel like these younger generations than us, I think we're both kind of the mid to older millennial, they tend to give up really easy, right? It's the
Hmm.
throwaway culture, it's the YouTube culture, it's the easy path culture, right? And so just kind of reminding our kids, like, you can do hard things, and not just our
Hmm.
sons but our daughters too.
That's right. Yeah. That's good.
What's the next one? The second one.
Uh, so the second one is, let me go back here. You are not important.
And what was the kind of Christianese version of that, right?
Of what he said,
Yep.
boys care about themselves, but men care about others.
Right. And I think this was, when I talked about things that I learned this last year, this is probably one of the bigger things, right?
Mm.
Um, because a lot of the conflicts that I had the year before, a lot of the issues, that I found myself dealing with, ultimately were because I was so centered on me and my wants
mm,
and my needs
mm,
and my desires and my expectations. And if I'm being honest, couldn't give a crap about anybody else,
mm,
and I wouldn't have said that at the time, but looking
mm,
back on it now, I see just how selfish and self-centered my motives were. And so, when I talk about I'm just now learning some of these things, the
mm,
concept of I am not important, and I need to focus on others is a daily battle for me.
mm. I think that's forever. I mean, that's just in us.
Right.
I mean, we want people to look at us and say, "Oh, I like your outfit," or "Oh, are those new shoes?" Like value me, appreciate me. Like this goes back to the core of like, what are we putting our identity in?
Mm-hmm.
What framework have you been built on, right? Have you been built on just the value of the things that you own, the clothes that you wear, or how much money you make? Because if that's how you've been encouraged, or that's how what people have told you, then like that's where that identity comes from, and all of that will crumble. And of course, the social media world doesn't help either, Matt. When you have influencers and all these people, it's all about them. And let's be honest, you even have Christian songs that talk about ourselves.
Right.
That we sometimes, I mean, they're songs, they're not worship, it's songs. And so we just need to know that.
I feel
So I think we
like
have to be really careful with
I
that.
feel like idolatry is one of those sins that like flies under the radar.
Mm, mm,
We've got these big sins that we talk about, murder, theft,
mm,
adultery, those types of things. And we know about the, have no other gods, right, besides me. And we look at the Old Testament and we look at Aaron, and the Israelites making the golden calf and worshiping. And we
mhm.
look at them and we're like, how stupid are you? Right. It just seems so obvious.
Right.
And because it was such an extreme example of idolatry in the Bible, I don't think that we always make the connection to our
Mm,
lives. But you go back to finding your identity in Christ versus other things. If you're looking to even your spouse to complete you, make you happy, satisfy you, whatever the case may be, I would make the argument that it's possible that your marriage or your wife you've made them an idol. If
mm,
you're looking to anything to complete you, other than Christ, it's quite possible that those things are idols, because idols are going to be what you spend your time, money, attention
mhm,
on, right? That are going to come before the Lord. And
mm.
so, I think we need to get back to this notion of have no other gods before me, because again, idolatry is not something that we talk about or think about a lot, but I think it is a core issue, a core
Mm.
heart issue that really leads to other sins.
Yeah, man. So what do you idolize?
Do what?
What's one thing you idolize?
For me, I would say I idolize like the my wife or the perfect marriage. I idolize cars. It's my hobby,
Hmm,
right?
hmm,
And I know that because, of the amount of time that I spend on YouTube watching things about
hmm,
cars or spending
hmm,
money on them or working on them. I know because, um, if my expectations aren't met or my wife's upset with me and it totally wrecks my day, right?
hmm.
Um, then, those are indicators to me that there's some idolatry possibly going on there.
You know, an idol, we talk about this in some of the Bible studies that the dads lead with their son or daughter, and an idol is something simply that just takes the place of God. And so
Yep.
for me, that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's YouTube, sometimes it's my phone or technology or my family or what. Like it can just kind of go all over the place.
It can be
The
good
thing is
stuff
like,
too, right?
yes, totally. Do I recognize it? My oldest the other day came to me. He's all about football right now. And he's like, Dad, what if I go to the NFL and that's not what God wants? Will he punish? Like, will there be punishment or whatever? And it's second, and our kids always ask the most fascinating questions that you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, like I feel like I need to draw this out, or I don't know, let me get back to you. Um, and I answered him one way. I was like, well, that when we go outside of what God wants, like yes, there's consequences. When we go out of what He desires for us, there's straight consequences. I was thinking about it more, and I was talking to my wife, And I was like, you know what? I do think there's things like you and I have talked about, Matt, where like you can do it and you cannot do it. But the bigger thing is like whatever we do, whether that's football or YouTubing to gain energy or knowledge in cars, like if we are using that to glorify God and use examples to build his kingdom and encourage other people in those areas, I don't think that that's wrong. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
We need more people in business or in the marketplace or in, cars that like love Jesus but like know cars really well. It's just when do those things like some of us take the place, and are they're their own gods.
Yeah.
And that's up to that individual and their heart and where they lie with that. But
What's the third one?
third one is
Your life is not
your
about
life
you.
is not about you. Yeah. Instead, I say you're part of the story, but you're not the whole story.
Right. And that kind of goes back to that
Right.
temptation of selfishness, right? I think the big thing for me in this is I'm a part of God's story,
Mhm.
and the larger narrative of what is playing out in terms of creation, fall, and redemption, right?
Mhm.
Like my life is such a blip in that story, but to me, it's the most important thing, you
Mhm.
know? And like, I think it changes your perspective. It should, when you're going through trials or when things are good or whatever the case may be, to realize like in the grand scheme of things, like this moment, this trial, this accomplishment is fairly insignificant on its own. But when it plays into the larger narrative of what God is doing for his people because he loves us,
Mhm.
it takes on a different meaning
Mhm.
and importance.
Yeah, which kind of goes into the next one. It says, you're not in control. And he says it's a shift from control to surrender. And which is like when I don't have control is when, like if my kids are all over the place and it's loud and it's chaotic and I'm like get frustrated and lose my self control. I'm like, why do I do that sometimes? Oh, it's because I don't, it's too chaotic and I don't have control of the situation.
Yep.
So I lose control.
It's this
Control, this
weird
is an
paradox,
interesting
right?
thing.
It's
Yes.
this weird paradox that the more you think I will have, I will feel better, I will have more peace, I will be less stressful if I could control everything. And maybe we
Mhm.
don't like consciously think that, right? But our
Right.
actions and life reflect that belief. And on the other side, like there's this fear. There's this fear when it comes to surrender, like I talked about this in my last like Tacoma, deep thoughts,
Mhm.
is we want God to fix things in our life, but we're unwilling to let him fix everything, right?
Mhm.
And because we want to hold on to some of those things, we want to have a little bit of control because we're fearful, right? That thing that we
Mhm.
love, that we idolize, is going to be taken away, or that sin is going to be exposed, right? Whatever the case
Mhm.
may be. But the reality is that unless we completely surrender, we're not ever going to have peace. Like control does
Mhm.
not bring peace. Surrender brings peace,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, you realize it's not about me. I can't control the situation. Like trusting the Lord is scary, but it's also the most restful position to be in, I think.
I just want to stop here and encourage those who are listening to this. Um, there's all areas of our own lives and your lives where you haven't relinquished control to God. And maybe right now needs to be the time. And that's simply just confessing to God what that area is and giving him that control, giving it back to him, letting him have that. And it doesn't need to be a big thing. Look, when my kids get in an argument and they have a hissy fit, we work it out and then we ask them to forgive each other, which, maybe a fancy word for that is just repent. Just tell God you're sorry and you want him to take control of that again and and let him go. And I've met several people that there's that corner that they don't want to let go of, whether that's an addiction, whether that's pornography, alcoholism, I mean, there's tons of things we can name. several recently that once they finally they were like, okay, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm giving, God control of this in my life. Man, things just like really activated that God had their whole, and I believe God wants our whole, and not just a little bit. He wants every corner and every square inch of our being. And there's just areas I know in my own life that I've held on to, and it's such a sweet place to be in. You said the other day, Matt, you were like, I don't feel like I'm harboring any. What'd you say? That like that's just like a really sweet place to be in. Where you don't feel like you're at anger with anybody or five people, or you're just at peace.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, there's a book that kind of goes along with this idea. It's really short. I think it's called My Heart, Christ Home. And
mm,
it's this, very small little pamphlet type book, but it talks about these rooms being these different compartments of your life and how Jesus wants
mhm,
to take over those rooms, right?
that's right.
And
Mhm,
it ends with the closet at the top of the stairs. Like that's the last space of the house. And the story is like Jesus is like, what's in there? Like you've shown me the whole house, but what's in there, right? And that's where the skeletons are, where the deep secrets are, the embarrassing things in your life. And you're so fearful to like give him the key to that room too, but only when he's able to completely, like you said, fill every nook and cranny is he really going to be able to take control of your life and and us have ultimately what we want to have, and that's life abundant. There's this fear that if I surrender, that I'm not going to have what I consider to be life abundant, and maybe that's true, but I think what we all need to run after and see what truly it means by life abundant. And life abundant only comes through total and complete surrender to Jesus, where we're able to allow him to be Lord of our lives. And yes, we may lose some things that are important to us, but maybe they shouldn't be important to us,
yeah,
right?
it might hurt a little bit, right? There might be
Yeah,
some growing and stretching.
it's not easy.
We're not talking prosperity, just so we're clear.
No, 100%.
Okay.
And there was one more, right? Going
Yes,
from,
going from you're going to die. He said it's a shift from temporary to eternal.
yeah,
So,
I think,
what are you going to pass down? This is
this
all, we're just passing through.
this Christmas time is a perfect example, I think, for this to be like a teachable moment for our kids.
Mm,
Because right now it's all about the Christmas list. What present am I
dude,
getting? Right?
my
Like,
goodness.
ooh,
Yeah.
I want to go do this,
All about me, consumerism.
Yeah,
Ah.
exactly. And it's such a temporal thing, right?
Mhm,
And how do we shift this time to make it more eternal, right? Through
mhm,
service, right? Through thinking about, Christ being born, still enjoy some of those traditions, right?
mhm.
On an appropriate scale. But it's a perfect teachable moment opportunity to talk about eternal versus, temporal.
Absolutely.
Well, that's cool.
God knows us. He created us, guys. He knows all about us. It's like our kids. When our kids come to us and you're like, you're not telling me something because you know them. They're like your kid. They might resemble you a little bit. They're little image bearers.
Yeah.
God knows us. Like he wants us to talk to him as his, earthly father, like we talk to our heavenly father. So,
And he's got our best interest at heart.
right.
I see this with my oldest daughter because, she's getting close to being an adult, at least legally. And, there are times that we hold her back,
Mm,
or we tell her no. And a lot of times it's things that her friends are already allowed to do.
mm,
And so it seems really unfair. And it
mm,
seems like we're just trying to be mean or overly strict or whatever the case may be. And we just continue to remind her, like, you can trust us. We are on your
mm,
side. We have
mm,
wisdom that you don't. And we're
mm,
not doing this to punish you or to keep you from having a good time. We're doing this because we're playing the long game with your life.
mm,
And that's exactly how the Lord is with us, right?
mm.
Like he has a perspective that we don't. He knows what our future holds. He knows what our true heart's desires are. And he wants to help us through that for sure.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, I hope your family has a very, very Merry Christmas.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk again before then. And
Yeah, we
hopefully I can
will.
get you a mic soon so that you don't sound like
All right, guys.
garbage. Maybe it'll sound better once we actually publish it. We'll see. So
Yeah,
all
working on
right.
it.
Well, always a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Go serve your family well.
All right, buddy. We'll see you.
All right,
Bye.
man. Later. Thanks for listening to the Dad Habits Die Hard podcast. Help us out by following us and rating us on iTunes. And you can also find the video version of this podcast on YouTube. You can find the link in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell to never miss an episode.